A touching tribute and fitting salute to the man who shepherded Boston for more than 2 decades. Tom Menino, the city's longest-serving mayor, was laid to rest today following a funeral service at his neighborhood parish in Hyde Park. It was a private mass, but hundreds of people lined the streets of the procession route to thank the mayor for his service one last time. It's been repeated over and over since his death Thursday that Menino managed to personally meet more than half of the city residents. And it was clear today just how many lives he touched. The quaint and crowded streets around the most precious blood parish were cordoned off from through traffic as police, Secret Service, media hordes, and a few bystanders, some holding "Thank you, Mayor Menino" signs, waited for the arrival of Mayor Menino's funeral procession. Invited guests and dignitaries arrived early, piling off buses and into the church. The mayor's body was escorted into the church by a phalanx of police and ecumenical representatives, greeted by pallbearers at the door. Inside, a who's who of the city's political and business leaders prepared for a mass that would be both eloquent and down to earth, starting with Mayor Marty Walsh.
Thomas Michael Menino, the relentless, the big-hearted, the people-loving urban mechanic, has gone to fix potholes in heaven. Tom Menino believed in underdogs. He knew what it was to be underestimated. He knew what it was to struggle. But he also knew the deep potential in every human being.
Governor Deval Patrick remembered that 10 years ago when he was a political newcomer asking for the mayor's support, he said no. But the two soon became friends, along with their wives, Diane and Angela.
Angela, I know your heart is broken. He told me once that his favorite thing in the world, even better than shopping, was to be home with you for dinner. He rarely went out to his weekly round of Saturday night events without you, so at least you could be together then. It seems especially sad that he would be taken just at the point when you got his undivided attention. The last real conversation we had was by phone the week before when he urged me to have fun in these last couple of months as governor and said, quote, "Don't let the knuckleheads get you down." Classic, succinct, and useful advice from one of the best.
Menino's friend and parish priest of many years said that while the mayor always put family first, he treated every individual equally.
He didn't wear it on his sleeve. He didn't beat a drum or step up on a tabletop to preach. But he cared about every person whom he encountered in a way that let them know that he was truly invested in them and listening to them. To that man, that woman, that little boy or girl in whose presence he was, and gave them his undivided attention. And not only did he listen to them, he followed up.
His granddaughters said they could not imagine a day that Papa was not mayor, and that he took time to call them every single day.
There was not a morning that went by we didn't get a phone call from him. Each morning we took turns to answer the phone. It was almost impossible to make it to school on time because Papa never wanted to hang up. He always made sure he knew all about the day ahead of us, especially about the boys in our lives. Papa, we will miss those phone calls. Nini, thank you for always being there for me, the family's rock, and for staying strong through this tough time. We love you and we hope you know you will always be here for you. Just say the word and Mugsy and I will be on our way.
And finally, the mayor's chief of staff, Mitchell Weiss, knocked it out of the park.
And a friend who was with me said to the mayor, "It's great weather we're having." And Mayor Menino looked to the sunny sky and said, "That I'm not in charge of." I didn't believe him then. I wouldn't believe him today. The mayor, who never sought higher office, has one now. He was supposed to have more time. Not more time to relax, but more time to be in the mix of things. He always wanted to be in the mix of things. He was anguished not to be there on Boylston Street in the moments after the blasts. And he said to me over the phone, "You are my eyes and my ears." I am your eyes, and I saw thousands today lining the neighborhoods you transformed with signs in every language, ready to repay a debt to Angela that we never can, since she gave us you.
As a young man sang My Way, mourners gathered on the outside church steps to pay one more final moment of respect.
My friend, I'll say it clear, I'll state my case, of which I'm certain.
As a cold wind swirled, many spoke of the honor to be both Mayor Menino's friend and in attendance at today's invitation-only funeral.
It was a service for the ages. He'll go down as an historic figure. That's why everyone was here. And I think everyone in there knew that we won't see his likes again.
This guy served for 20 years without a blemish, with an incredible accomplishment. Boston is now truly a global, international city. All happens because of Tommy Menino.
I met him professionally as a journalist when he was a city councilor, and I grew to really love him. Now, how wrong is that for a journalist to love somebody she's covering? But I got to admit it, I did.
I was just blessed to have the opportunity to know him intimately, and it was such a beautiful program, and his grandchildren were amazing. They pulled it together for him today and just demonstrated all that he was about: family, about the community, and just about building a serious tradition of serving.
It's been a difficult couple of days for everybody. But, you know, this family has really paid an incredible price in service to the community. His wife, Angela, has been with him day in and day out, and his kids and grandchildren. They really are owed a debt of gratitude.
Today is just, it's the end of a very special time. And it's a great loss to me as a friend, and a great loss to the city and everybody within the city, rich and poor. He was so caring and just a very everyday guy.
What was the feeling inside there today?
It was one of grief, but also one of adoration. The remembrances that we heard, the thoughts, the praise. This was a man of the people who loved everything about Boston, every inhabitant, every street corner and kid. Showed it 20 years.
My next guests each endured a close personal and professional relationship with Mayor Menino. Jim Rooney served for 2 years as his chief of staff. He's now the executive director of the Massachusetts Convention Center Authority. Larry Mays served as chief of human services in the Menino administration. He's now vice president of programs at Catholic Charities. And former city councilor John Nucci now serves as vice president of government and community affairs at Suffolk University. Welcome to you all. Well, it was incredible to me that right down to the people who spoke, to the music that was chosen, Mayor Menino plotted out today's events. It was like his final reach down. That surprised me a little bit, that he wanted to have that much control over the details.
Well, it didn't surprise those that have worked close with him. He had that kind of need, as Mitch said today, to be in the mix of things. A sponge for information about everything that was going on in this city. So to think that, his final farewell would be something that he would want to put his mark on doesn't surprise me at all.
He invited a lot of very prominent people, all of you among them, but someone of his stature can't afford to snub anybody, so of course he had people from both sides of the aisle. Vice President Joe Biden was there. What was it like for all of you to be in a room with, you look around, John Fish from Suffolk Construction, all the leaders, and over the decades, not just from, this current time, but going way back over his 20 years?
It's like almost half. If a generation is 40 years, 20 years is a long time. Only thing I was concerned about was that we were at least 20 minutes late, and I said, man, we would have all been blasted. Because he never wanted to be late, but he was never late for anything.
I know, he was late for his funeral, but I was thinking he would be annoyed by that the procession took longer.
Yeah, there were a lot of movers and shakers in the crowd at the church, but to me, what impressed me was the mix. The people who stood on the sidewalk during the procession. The governor talked about the mayor always having time for the mighty and the meek. You saw the mighty and the meek out today. They were all out to pay tribute with the mayor, to the mayor. And that's I think, the strength of what Tom Menino was, that he did have time for everybody. It wasn't just the high and mighty. He was never happier than when he was in the neighborhoods. I think there was no point in the year where he was as happy as he was at Christmas time. When he'd get on the trolley and he'd go neighborhood to neighborhood lighting Christmas trees. And he'd have his grandkids in the trolley. It was a perfect mix for him of family and neighborhoods. I think that was the happiest weekend of the year for him.
Yeah, there were a lot of tears, obviously, inside the church, but outside, too, was just remarkable. People coming by, saying, you know, a moment of prayer, or someone would shout out, "Thank you, Mayor Menino." And you saw that all along the processional route, too. I was struck by just what you said, John, by the variation of people from all walks of society who made an attempt, or at least to stand near the church or get near to the processional.
Yeah, I think the 2 days was incredibly well done. At Faneuil Hall, the procession, the Mass today, and you saw people whose lives he touched in some ways that didn't make it onto the news, whether it was help with school, whether it was help with a homeless situation, a fire. He was there for everyone, and he wanted to be there. Someone said that today. He wanted to be involved with everything going on in this city and every situation that people had. He wanted to know about, and he wanted to help.
You know, one of the ones that struck me, Kaylee Harriet was there. She was the young girl that was struck by a bullet, paralyzed from the waist down when she was 3 years old. She's now 15.
She's 15.
A beautiful young woman. She was there, and the mayor, of course, had bonded with her, too, over the years.
Well, there were many times, this mayor was so amazing in that big city mayors aren't known for, Emily, going, when there's a tragedy, going to the homes of the family and trying to mend it. But Mayor Menino made it a habit that there was a tragedy that happened in the city of Boston. He would go to that home. And so there were numerous times where I would go with him to a home where there was a tragedy, and it would just blow me away that this mayor, he just had such a compassion for people and what they were going through.
The people who came out and stood along that procession, it had a different feeling to me than other type funerals that I've seen. You know, there are celebrity political figures who may pass on, and people sort of line the route. You wonder how many of them are there just to be there because it's the place to be. But I really got the feeling that the people who were outside that church and along that procession route had some story.
They did.
They had some
and actually,
interaction with the man.
Our Adam Riley from WGBH was there, and he filed this report from the processional sidelines. He was remembered as a mayor who relished Boston's neighborhoods, someone who enjoyed talking with ordinary people from Roxbury, East Boston, as much as bigwigs from Beacon Hill, as we were just saying. So it's fitting that his funeral procession traveled through his beloved city, starting at Faneuil Hall and winding past meaningful landmarks en route to Menino's neighborhood parish. The mayor's final tour of Boston took him past the Mattapan Public Library, where WGBH News reporter Adam Riley spoke with mourners.
The Mattapan branch of the Boston Public Library is one small piece of Tom Menino's story, a gleaming new structure in a neighborhood that struggled with violence and blight. This morning, as the mayor's funeral procession approached, it was a gathering point.
He was a nice person.
Lizzie Keene was one of the first people there. She called Mayor Menino a few years ago after a contractor promised to fix her heating system, but took her money instead. The city responded, giving Keene and her elderly mother precious heat during a tough winter.
Mayor Menino's office stepped in and heard my prayer.
That same sense of personal connection and gratitude brought Marilyn McLean to Mattapan from her home in Jamaica Plain.
I've always had a great affection for him.
McLean used to work at the Central Library in Copley Square. She met Menino after flooding ravaged the library's collections in 1998.
It was devastating to the people that work there. A lot of politicians would have met with the higher-ups. He walked around and talked to everybody that worked there and said, "How has this affected you?"
As Menino's funeral procession wound its way south, from the Parkman House to Fenway Park to Dudley Square, the crowd in Mattapan continued to grow, and the stories kept coming.
I have a son who's very shy, And I told him, oh, my son really wants to meet you. He's very shy. And he just took him and talked to him for a while. And that's very, very, in a very loving way. He showed so much interest, and that really inspired children, to know that the mayor of this big city really will take the time and talk to you.
For some, it was a chance to reflect on a legacy they helped Menino build. Jim Clark was appointed by the mayor to Boston's zoning board 2 decades ago.
I've seen a lot happen in the last maybe 20 years in Boston, and it's all been for the best.
How did he change from the time you first met him to, the end of his 20 years?
The funny thing, he really never changed in terms of his personality. He was still Mayor Menino. He was Menino. I mean, Tom Menino is a good-hearted person. He loved the city. He loved the people.
Finally, at 11:44 a.m., the procession bearing Menino's casket to Hyde Park came south down Blue Hill Avenue. As it approached, the crowd began to cheer. And with that, after just a few seconds, Mayor Tom Menino's final visit to Mattapan was over. I remember hearing a few years back that the mayor had met more than 50% of everyone in Boston and thinking, there's got to be some exaggeration there. People saying they met him because they feel like they've met him, and then you start talking to people at an event like this, and you realize
like
he
going into the
did.
library and speaking to everybody in the library instead of the head of the library, Amy Ryan, or somebody. He went around and spoke to everybody.
Yeah, I talked to, and we heard Governor Patrick say it earlier, but I remember talking to Michael Flaherty, who ran against Menino in 2009, the day he passed away, and he said, you'd go to a ribbon cutting or a grand opening, and after a couple minutes, you'd think, hey, where's Mayor Menino? And he'd be off on the side of the room talking with the ordinary man or woman saying, hey, what are you hearing? How are you doing? What's important to you? And that a lot of times, Flaherty said, that would become policy. We heard the woman talk about the mayor sitting down with her very shy son and making him feel comfortable. I have to say, you guys have seen a lot more of Mayor Menino than I have, but over the years, I saw him with kids several times, and I loved watching him with kids. He interacted with kids the way you'd want an adult interacting with your own kids, respectfully, matter of fact but friendly, treating them like, little individuals as opposed to, tots to be patronized or something. It was always heartwarming.
All right, Adam, thanks for that.
Thanks, Emily.
Yeah, he said something to me once, about a year ago when I was doing an exit interview, and he was actually talking about kids that were troubled. That have even committed violent acts and crimes, and he said they're not bad kids. They just never had any direction. I mean, even referring to some thugs as knuckleheads. I mean, he's used that, and even today I heard him use that term, knucklehead. I mean, he kind of meant that if somebody had a father figure, maybe they'd be all right.
He absolutely believed that to be true. He thought that given a certain set of circumstances, if they were positive, that a child would grow up to be someone very productive. That's why, for him, he put a lot of emphasis on 0 to 5, then onward. But he felt that 0 to 5 was a critical point in terms of nurturing and development of young people. And he really believed that if someone was following a bad path or was a knucklehead, it's because something happened between 0 and 5. All right. So.
There was nothing that made him happier than being with kids, especially in schools. One of the jobs of chief of staff is to oversee his schedule, and one of the tricks we learned, of course, is to make sure that every week there was something with kids on his schedule, because he'd come back to City Hall in a very good mood if he went to a trip to a school and hung out with kids for a while.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of elected officials, politicians, they'll run around shaking hands with kids and patting kids in the head and shaking hands with adults, but that's not meeting somebody. That's greeting somebody. And when people say they met Mayor Menino, it's because they met him. He didn't just get greeted by the person. They met the person. They had a conversation with the person. And he'd go into a room, he'd go into an event, and I'm sure Jimmy would agree with this. His staff would be going crazy because they wanted to get him out to go to the next event, but he was too busy talking to people and listening to what they had to say.
That event yesterday down at Faneuil Hall was incredibly moving, partly for that reason. I mean, there were a lot of children in that line. It was cold, it was windy, it was raining. At one point it's snowing. There were whole families of people waiting up to an hour to file in. Jim, you knew him well, especially as a chief of staff, and I often wondered, in a way, what other politicians like presidents and other big city mayors and governors thought of him, because he did have a very simple style, and he could be hard to understand and hard to follow at times. And I used to wonder, what do they think?
Well, I think in many ways they envied him because every year, year after year, 80+% approval ratings, and they'd wonder, what is this guy doing to do it? And I think we're talking about it. It was retail politics. It was meeting and treating everyone with respect. He knew every retail establishment on every main street from Dorchester to Rosendale and back and forth. He knew who owned it. He knew if it would have been passed down from family to family. He knew the kids, whether they were off at school. And I'm sure that they thought maybe he wasn't a visionary big thinker and, you know, as articulate as perhaps others were. But boy, they envied his approval ratings.
They did.
He knew the best places to eat, too.
Yeah.
All the
and
best
shop.
places to eat.
Yes.
And shop. That's right. Yeah, he really did.
He once gave me coupons to Finley's Basement.
Was that a hint?
Yes, because he looked at my tie and he says, he just gave me this frown. He says, Larry, I got some coupons for you. I want you to go down to Finley's Basement.
But he needed to take you
get some ties.
Well, he went a step further with me. He actually dragged me down there and he made me buy 6 ties. So I must have been wearing some real ugly ones.
Yeah, he would let you know if he didn't like the way you were dressed or if he thought the colors didn't match. He actually said to me one day at a press conference, just as I was about to grab the microphone, he leaned over and said, "Did you dress in the dark this morning?"
I love it.
So that's
I want to play one final bit of sound from Mitchell Weiss, who was the final speaker today. And the last chief of staff, you were one of the chiefs. He had 6 chief of staffs in 20 years. And he was speaking about his relationship, the mayor's relationship with his overall staff. And here's what Mitchell Weiss had to say.
Team Menino loved you. They loved you because you shoved them into their futures. They loved you during magic hour. On a Friday at dusk, when you would sit at your table and regale with stories of the early campaigns and the early days and the way things used to be and the way they could. They loved you when you said things like, "I am mayor of all the people, and government is for helping people," and when you meant it, and when that made it okay for them to believe it was true and to make it so.
It really says something when your staff loves you, right, Jim?
I think it does, but he loved everyone back.
Yes. I'm going to miss him terribly.
Yeah. And, you know, helping people, people said he didn't have a vision. Helping people was his vision. And I can't think of a better vision to have.
All right. John Nucci, thanks so much. Larry Mays and Jim Rooney, thank you.